Hi everyone, my name is Neves. I'm a mom of 2 girls and I've recently left my job and my career in order to stay home and homeschool my children. So deciding to homeschool my kids was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make, and I mean it makes a lot of sense considering how much of my life was going to change and how much of my identity also as a working mom was going to be uprooted, and I would have to become something new and something different in order to make it work. And I remember when I was figuring out whether we are going to be homeschooling or not, I would have all these fears creeping in and so many anxieties inside of me eating at me. And I feel like oftentimes it felt lonely. It felt like I didn't know who to turn to, who to talk to about that. And I would sometimes talk to my friends and family who are not necessarily in the best predicament to give me advice. And who had their own judgments and reservations about homeschooling, or who would sometimes try and listen and it wouldn't necessarily amount to the reassurance I needed. But that's because I couldn't find reassurance in anyone else. I had to find it within. So today I wanted to make this video for those of you who are going through that, who are in this limbo mode where you want to homeschool, you feel called to homeschool, your heart is in it, but you are so scared of all these other aspects that come with homeschooling and with the decision to homeschool. I also want to add a disclaimer that deciding to homeschool was my decision, my husband's decision, but he was on board from day one. He was on board like months to a year before I was. So it became my decision at the end of the day, and that makes a lot of sense because I was the one who had to leave my job in order to be able to stay at home with my children. So yeah, that's why sometimes if I do reference it as my decision, that is why. So today I wanted to talk about those common fears that we all have when we decide to homeschool. I wanted to touch on my biggest fears that I've had and that were holding me back from pulling the plug and making that decision. And then in the next part of my video, I want to touch on how to go about those fears and how to not let those fears be the ruling factor in deciding what you should do with your life, whether you decide to homeschool or not homeschool. So one of the most common fears that a lot of people have, and I know I've had it, is becoming a one-income family. So I can only speak for myself here because I don't know your financial situation, but for us, going from 2 incomes to 1 income was a huge adjustment and one that we had to make in order to be able to stay home and homeschool our children. Of course, you're making a huge financial sacrifice when you decide to go on 1 income. So for me, the main questions were, are we going to be able to continue our life on a single income? Are we going to be able to do all these things we get to do now on 1 income? And the answer for us was a complex one. It was a yes and no answer. No, we weren't able to continue our life as we had it before, but yes, we are able to live comfortably still, and we are able to prioritize what we say yes to in terms of financial obligations and what we say no to. Yes, our life looks very different from those of our friends and family who are on 2 incomes. And we have to budget and be intentional about what we say yes and no to in terms of eating out at a restaurant, certain lavish experiences, or not even lavish experiences, certain life experiences that we cannot necessarily say yes to because we are not able to afford it at the moment. What we give to other people, what we give to each other, for example, those are all things that are impacted. But also, I think we are gaining so much more. We're gaining more intentionality in terms of what we are doing with our money, with our income, what we are saying yes to, not just financially, but time-wise as well. So I think that's been a beautiful blessing in disguise from this whole experience. So I think when it comes to financial fears, that's something that's really personal and that you're gonna have to sit down with your husband and your partner and put that on paper. And if you see that you are able to make this happen, but there are a lot of sacrifices, that's not a bad thing. And that's not something that should require fear. That's just something that's a challenge right now in your life and to be embraced, because it's gonna bring a whole new window of creativity and of opportunities in your life. You're going to be more crafty. You're going to be more creative in how you spend your money, how you use your money, and potentially in how you make more money as well. Another big fear I had was my shift in identity. Right after I made the decision to homeschool my children and to leave my job in order to do so, I remember getting a lot of notifications from LinkedIn of colleagues who were at the level that I was at or below me, moving up or getting promotions. So it got to me. I hate to admit it, but it did. So I actually had to deactivate LinkedIn so I could focus on what it is that we decided to do. So these worldly things like career or status have no importance on our value as a human being. It doesn't make us a better or a worse human being just because we have a change in our job title or we get a promotion or a demotion. So for me, I had to learn a lot of that. I had to do a lot of spiritual work in order to enter this new phase of my life. But our identity is not employee, manager, or corporate role or corporate title. Our identity is not even being a mother or a stay-home mother. It's beyond that. And that's where we need to get comfortable in certain roles and realize that it doesn't change who we are deep inside, and it doesn't change our qualities as human being. Another really important fear I've had was whether I was able to give my children a proper education. Am I really suited to be my children's teacher? Am I qualified enough to teach them certain things? So that's a really tough one because we're our own worst critic. And of course, it's our children's education at stake. And not just their education, their whole childhood. They get to spend way more time with you than ever before. So of course, you're going to be so terrified of failing them. I was really terrified of failing them, and I'm still terrified every single day. So that fear never went away. But I try not to get ahead of myself. I tell myself, okay, so right now we're at the kindergartner level, and right now it's going well. I'm able to teach my child to read. We are exploring the outdoors. We are spending a lot of time outside. I am teaching them about some really beautiful works of poetry, of art. I'm learning alongside of them. I'm, enriching their minds in a way that their minds wouldn't be enriched in a school setting. And so I have to focus on that. And then, once the older subjects come, we'll reevaluate. And if I find that I'm not the best equipped to teach my child algebra, there's a lot of resources out there. There are tutors, there are online programs, there are so many books. But one thing I've found so important is not to get ahead of yourself and really focus on where you are right now. And right now is exactly where you're supposed to be. You as a mother also have the power to influence your child so positively and to lead by example by nurturing your own mind and learning and reading books and showing them what that looks like. And also, I have so much more free time to read classics, to learn about the natural world, to enrich my mind in order to be the best version of a teacher I can be to my children. Your child will never have the kind of attention, the kind of nurturing and care and education in any other setting that they would have inside their home. Another fear that I hear people having, and I had it before, was, are my children going to have friends? And the answer is yes. You are homeschooling. You're not moving to the middle of nowhere on a mountain surrounded by just wild goats and exempt from all human life. That's not what you're doing right now. Or maybe you are, but and then in that case, you're probably not watching this video or wondering about it. But yes, a lot of people still have fears about socialization, and socialization happens at school. It's a lot of socialization, but I don't think it's necessarily the most positive of socialization experiences. So when it comes to, will my child make friends? Yes, they will. Homeschooling is only a lonely journey if you want it to be so. There are so many homeschoolers out there, and every year more and more are joining the journey. I mean, there's so many people you don't expect to be homeschooling who are doing it. So it's definitely not a lonely world, and you're going to find your community. Even as part of your day-to-day life, you're going to be running errands, you're going to be going to certain places that your children wouldn't get the experience to go to when they're at a school setting for 6 or 7 hours a day. For example, I brought my eldest to the vet the other day when we were going for a cat, and she got to see our cat get examined. She got to ask some questions. The vet was very curious about my child being there. It was just a really nice experience to have her be part of that setting and learn in a hands-on kind of way. So they're going to be encountering so many different kind of people from many age groups. And even in the homeschool community, you have homeschool groups, homeschool co-ops, you have learning pods, you have forest schools, there's field trips organized on Facebook groups. There's just such a variety of ways to get engaged in the homeschooling community and to really meet your tribe and make friends. And we've had that experience, and I can attest that no, your child will not grow up to just be a lone wolf isolated from society. That is not what's going to happen. Now, when it comes to these fears, a lot of them come from the fear of the unknown, of letting go of what is comfortable and familiar to you. And you will have to do that in order to move on to this next step. There's a reason why you feel this so strongly in your heart, why you feel called to homeschool. And I would hate for anyone to let go of that reason and not listen to their why and not listen to their heart, but rather listen to their fear instead. Being scared is normal, but don't let the decision come from fear. Let it come from your heart. What you're doing is quite countercultural. So homeschooling is more common than ever, but it is still countercultural compared to the rest of the society, right? So what you're feeling is normal. You're probably feeling lots of isolation from your neighbors, not necessarily because they're isolating you, but because you are doing something so different. I remember when I was deciding to homeschool, we would go out into the park and all the moms, we would get talking like we normally do, and they would remember that my eldest was starting school that September, and they would make a comment, "Oh, is she going to the school next door?" And I'd have to tell them, "Well, we're actually considering homeschooling." And that's when, I'd get the big eyes and I'd get all these questions. It sometimes felt almost defensive more than curious. And I wasn't secure enough at that point because I had those fears and anxieties eating at me. So that had a big impact on my decision making, when in fact, it shouldn't matter what someone else is doing in their life. What they do in their life and what I do in mine has zero impact on each other's lives. And that's something I had to remember every time I would encounter people who were doing things the normal way. Because at the end of the day, I would come home and I would quiet my thoughts and my anxieties, and I would realize that really what I have in my heart is the will to homeschool. I really want to do this and I really want to make this happen. So I had to sometimes block out the external world and listen to myself, my heart, God. If you're religious, I recommend praying. I recommend meditating on that and really getting your answers there as opposed to the outer world. I also recommend surrounding yourself with other homeschoolers, veteran homeschoolers, new homeschoolers, people who are thinking about homeschool. There's a lot of wisdom there and a lot that you can learn from each other, and I recommend surrounding yourself with those people rather than seeking advice from people who are not familiar with the lifestyle. I think you're going to find a lot of inspiration there. And this goes hand in hand with surrounding yourself with other homeschoolers, but I recommend learning as much as you can about homeschooling. Learn about the community that you are part of. Learn about the different learning styles for your children. Learn about the different teaching styles, different homeschooling philosophies. Read lots of books, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos that are informational and that feel good to you. And then let yourself dream about what it is your homeschooling journey could look like. Think of what it is that you want to offer your children. Why do you want to do this? What kind of rhythm do you picture your days having? Even things like, what is your learning space going to look like? Will you have a homeschool room, or are you going to be learning around the dining room table? Think and let yourself really immerse yourself in that experience. And I think you're going to find a lot of inspiration and a lot of will to do it through those experiences. Never let go of the why that drove you to want to homeschool in the first place. That tug at your heart that you feel, it's there for a reason. There's a reason why you're being called to do this with your children and to have this experience with your children. Fear is a really wonderful thing when it's holding you back from being eaten by a lion or a bear, but it's a horrible thing when it is actually holding you back from following your dreams and following your purpose and what it is that you want to do in life. So there you go. I hope that this video found those of you who are in the limbo state right now and who are currently deciding whether to homeschool or not. Whatever your decision is, whether you choose to homeschool or not choose to homeschool, please don't let it come from fear. And same thing, if you do choose to homeschool, don't let it come from fear of the public school system either. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in another video. Bye everyone.